All right, it is my pleasure to introduce Becky Rutherford, who is with Cybersecurity, and she's going to talk today about cybersecurity for small businesses. Please join me in welcoming Becky.
Thank you. Hi, so I've been with Lanel for like 3.5 years, and I've been in cybersecurity for like a year and a half or so. I've been trying to reach out to the community, and I've been doing like some articles for the Los Alamos Daily Post about cybersecurity awareness, and I thought it'd be nice to reach out to local business, because what I'm seeing in the news is businesses, and especially small businesses and nonprofits, being hit really hard by things like ransomware and phishing attacks and other things. So this is just, it's not every possible thing that you need to know. It's just like, I don't know, the best ones that I can think of that are the most pertinent right now and that I'm seeing a lot in the news. So we're going to go over kind of like, what is the risk, phishing, and also phishing and smishing, ransomware, and then just how to defend yourself and be cyber smart. So like, what is the risk to my business of a cyber attack? You know, like, you can hope that you're going to be lucky and that it won't happen. But if you're watching the news, chances are it's probably it could happen. So it's something that you need to be aware of and thinking about. Risk is defined as basically a situation involving exposure to danger. We're all exposing ourselves to risk every day. If you have computers and they're connected to the internet, you're exposing yourself to cyber risk. And you might think, oh, you know, we're too small. They're only going to go after the big guys. They're going after the little guys because they know that the little guys may not have the defenses that the big guys have, and that it's going to be easier to get in. And then they can ransom you for, you know, $1,000, $10,000. And if they do that to enough people across the world, then they're going to be making a ton of money. So they're going to go after the little guys. And according to the Verizon 2019 Data Breach Investigations Report, 43% of cyber attacks target small businesses. That's huge. And cybersecurity firm 4IQ states cyber criminals targeted small businesses with cyber attacks jumped over 425% from the previous year. So I mean, we're just seeing huge amounts of activity in this area. So you know, make sure that you know the risks. The effects of cyber attacks: they can damage data stored on your computer. They can render your hardware useless. So you'll have to replace all your servers, all your equipment. I've seen news stories where people have had like 20,000 computers, you know, large companies have had like 20,000 computers bricked by ransomware attacks. People have had like, I think in one of the recent hospital attacks, they had like 1,500 computers that were just lost from the ransomware attack, their entire system. Cyber attacks are really expensive to recover from. Look at Baltimore. Have you guys heard about the Baltimore ransomware case in the news? Yeah, that was huge. Like they put ransomware on the city of Baltimore's servers. It spread everywhere. It's cost them millions of dollars to recover from that. I think they ended up not paying the ransom, but it was still incredibly expensive. And also, you know, loss of customer data. If you're dealing with any kind of sensitive customer data, and you might think that you aren't, but you probably are if you're accepting payment, like credit cards, stuff like that. If you're in the healthcare industry, you're definitely dealing with that. Finance, stuff like that. If you lose that data, you could be liable for, you know, lawsuits from your customers. And damage to your reputation. I mean, look at like Equifax. How many of you are still like, oh, Equifax, they're great? So I mean, I think that Equifax lost a lot in the, you know, in the reputation field after that attack. And now people really think twice when they're thinking about, you know, credit reporting. So anything like Target, after the Target breach, for years people were nervous about that. These things really can affect your customer base. So now we're gonna talk about phishing, and smishing. How many of you, probably everybody's heard of phishing, right? Has anybody heard of phishing? That's like phone phishing, where they call you and they're like, oh, you know, I'm from the IRS, or I'm from the Social Security Administration, and your Social Security number is expired, and blah, blah, blah. Smishing, that's like phishing via text message, where they might send you something pretending to be like from your bank or something. So first we're going to talk about phishing. Phishing attacks. There's kind of like the more generic, kind of like deceptive phishing attack. It's not as targeted. It's more like just like a spray and pray kind of approach. They're going to send out a huge amount of these, and you know, enough people will reply that they'll probably be able to make some money off of it, right? So they're not super targeted. They're going to be pretty generic. Then you're dealing with things that probably small businesses really have to worry about a lot more. Spear phishing. This is a highly targeted kind of phishing. They research your organization, they learn about, you know, who your CEO is, they learn about who your admins are. They try to, we call it footprinting. They get as much information as they can about your business so they can use it to craft these highly targeted phishes to try to get into your organization. That's something that you really need to worry about. And that's something that tech is having trouble fixing, because the problem is, with people. It's really easy to hack people, and that's harder to do. You have to train the people. You have to make sure that you're doing cyber awareness and that you're talking with them and that your IT people are getting out and talking with them to make them really aware that this is a threat. One big thing that we're seeing right now is a specific kind of phishing called business email compromise. This is where they will pretend to be the CEO of your company, and they'll shoot out some emails to whoever they think your admins are, and they'll be like, oh, I'm in a meeting. Can you do me a quick favor? Can you run out and get me $1,500 worth of gift cards? Because
That happens to us.
yeah, it happens all the time to everybody. And if you're not thinking, you might just think, oh, okay, I got to do this for my boss. They're using that element of fear and urgency. I mean, it's your boss. Your boss is like, oh, well, I need help with this now. So you're going to drop everything and try to help them, right? I mean, they're taking advantage of that. That's social engineering at its finest. So another variant of business email compromise, something that I'm seeing a lot that people really have to be thinking about, vendor email compromise. They will go after your vendors. They will figure out who you do business with. They will make themselves the man in the middle. They will compromise your vendors' email accounts. They will get in. They will get persistence. They will watch what's going on. They're very patient. They'll watch the back and forth. They'll wait till they see there's an invoice that's due on such and such date. Then they'll jump into the conversation. They'll shoot off an email to you saying, oh, we've got this invoice that's due, but our banking information just changed, and we really need you to make this payment now, or we might have to take legal action against you. So here's the updated banking information. You send them your $200-something thousand payment, $20,000 payment, $500 payment, whatever it is, and you've sent it to the wrong bank. And if you're unlucky, it'll go through and you'll just be out the money, and you'll have to just figure out how to deal with that. I mean, that's a huge loss for people. In some cases, I've heard of it happening where that bank account was already flagged as being bad, and so then they were able to stop the transaction. I'm seeing this in schools a lot, especially schools that are doing big construction projects. They've been tricked into paying the wrong bank account for the construction company, because that's all open source public data that you can figure out. And these people are smart enough and they're motivated enough to figure it out. They'll figure out who you're doing business with, compromise them, and then try to get you to pay them. So that's a big thing that you have to watch out for, and I'm seeing that in the news a ton. Like I said, they all have one thing in common. They all use social engineering. It's the psychological manipulation of people to get them what you want to do by, tricking them. And you're using all these different things: urgency, a sense of fear. Oh, I'm your boss, and this needs to get paid right away, and blah blah blah. It's all about tricking people. So that's why you really have to get out and talk to your people about this, so that they're aware. Because most people don't realize this is a thing, but these people are just super tricky. So you have to help them. Signs of a phish: really generic greeting. Sense of urgency, requests for information that might seem unusual. If you get something out of the blue that you weren't expecting, even if it's from a vendor that you do business with, question it, because they could have gotten compromised. Call the vendor directly at the number that you have on file. Typos and grammatical errors, and keep in mind, it's also really easy to spoof email addresses. Even if they haven't compromised the vendor, they might be sending you an email from an email address that's off by just one letter or something that you wouldn't really notice unless you looked really closely. Don't just look at the sender name, because you can put whatever name you want in there. I can put George Washington and send off a bunch of emails to people, whatever you want. Just always expand it so that you can see the actual email address and verify that it is indeed the person that you know. And like I said, even if it is the person that you know, if it seems weird, something might be wrong. Do not click links or open attachments in any suspicious emails. Anything that you weren't expecting to come in, just call them, do it through another channel, try to verify what's going on with this. Do not put yourself open to that risk. And never send your password, your other sensitive information via email to any kind of email that you weren't expecting. If they're I'm from tech support and I need you to send me your password right now, or I need you to send me your username, just don't do it. Just do it through another channel, investigate it, be suspicious.
What's your opinion about doing an unsubscribe?
Don't click unsubscribe. That's another way that they'll get you. Yeah, because it could be a legitimate unsubscribe, or it could be a phishing link. So I don't do it. I use Gmail for my personal email, and with Gmail you can just select the email and then click report spam, and it'll automatically ask you, do you want to unsubscribe to this? So I don't have to click anything, and it just takes care of it all on the back end. So I would not click on the unsubscribe link. Phishing. This is when cyber criminals use social engineering over the phone to try to trick you into giving them personal information. Has anyone gotten a call like from the IRS? Yeah, threatening you and yeah. We all get these. And there's been like one going around where they say they're from like the Social Security Administration and that somebody has been using your social security number in another state to do crimes, and that if you don't pay them like $2,000 worth of like Smith's gift cards right away, then you're gonna go to jail. And they're doing all the, and you know, you might think like, oh, you know, who would fall for that? Lots of people would fall for that because you don't think about it, and it's scary. I mean, I don't blame them. I would be scared too. Like, it's like if I didn't work in this field, I completely understand how that would be terrifying, and you would just get so caught up in the moment that you could fall for it. That's what they're doing. They're playing on people's emotions. Kicking it up a notch, recently scammers were able to use AI, artificial intelligence, to spoof a CEO's voice and then use that spoofed voice to request a wire transfer. They were able to successfully transfer $243,000 to a fraudulent bank account. Not something that you probably have to worry about right now, but just something to be aware of, that they are highly motivated to figure out ways to take our money. Did you have a question?
I'm puzzled in this. In the ransomware, you say to a fake bank account.
Well, okay, fraudulent, not to their bank account. So like they might tell you like, oh, you know, we're transferring this to your bank account.
Go after these?
Yes, they do. They go after these people all the time, but there's so many constantly popping up. Most of these are operated overseas, particularly in Nigeria. A lot of them are based out of Nigeria. That's where all the business email compromise gangs are. If you look into the research behind this, there's different groups like Scattered Canary, London Blue, Scarlet Widow, all these different groups that I've heard of from a company called Agari. They do fantastic research into the area. They are constantly moving money around. They are constantly switching bank accounts. So sometimes the bank accounts do get flagged, and a lot of people work really hard to try to make that happen behind the scenes, but there's always some that get through. So in this case, they were able to say, oh, please turn, you know, like we changed our bank account information. We need you to make this payment right now. Here's the new account number, blah, blah, blah. It was, you know, spoofing the CEO. And they were like, okay, they transferred the money, and then the money just disappeared. Because once you transfer the money, there's this thing called money mules. They have like whole just networks of people who are money mules, who they'll take the money out, transfer it to another bank account, take the money out, transfer, eventually probably turn it into Bitcoin or something. So it's pretty difficult to track this stuff down. And these people are just highly organized and, again, highly motivated to keep doing this. So you know, for phishing, verify unexpected phone requests through another channel, you know, hang up and call the official number for the company. Be suspicious of any caller who's asking you to share login info over the phone. Don't give this info out to unsolicited calls. One very common scam is like the tech support scam. I've had like relatives fall for this one. They'll call you up and they'll be like, I'm calling from Microsoft and your Windows expired and I need you to help me fix things for you, so please give me, they'll use like remote desktop protocol to get access to your computer remotely. Once they get in, they can do whatever they want to your computer, and they can put like ransomware on it and then demand a ransom. You know, in some cases it's like $500, but in other cases it can be a lot more. So that's one thing to watch out for. Tech support will never call you. They will never initiate the call. You always have to call them. So Microsoft will never call you, Apple, Google, whatever. And you know, you can also work with your phone provider to block suspicious calls. For me, for my personal phone, and my work phone too, if I don't know the number, I don't answer it, because chances are it's gonna be somebody sitting somewhere in some like bank of people on phones calling people and scamming them. So I just don't answer. If it's important, they'll leave me a message. And if they leave me a message that's really like spammy and scammy, I just block it, because it's really easy to do. An iPhone, probably an Android too. And if you have like a landline, probably you can work with your provider to find ways to block the numbers as well. Smishing. This is a type of phishing attack conducted via text message and also social media messaging. So like one thing that I've been seeing recently in my own Facebook account, I keep getting these like messages. People keep getting hacked. So like a friend will send me a message that's like, hey, have you seen these videos of you? And it'll be a link. And of course, you know, don't click the link. But you know, it's coming from your friend. So you're like, oh, well, that's cool. I'll check that out, right? But unfortunately, probably your friend got popped because they didn't have like two-factor authentication on their account, or possibly somebody is spoofing their account. I've also had people spoof my friends' accounts. I have a friend named Gina, and one day I got a message from somebody named like Ganny, with like her same last name and her picture, because they'll just grab your picture from whatever publicly available picture they can get. And I was like, that's not Gina. So just block. So you just have to be really careful with social media. And one interesting scam recently that was done via text messaging. Have you guys heard of Venmo? Yeah, so people were doing like a SMS scam basically targeting Venmo users, and they would say like, oh, your Venmo payment is on hold, please click here to fix things. And it looked fairly legit. Like they can spoof things to make them look pretty legit. Like they'll use the same color scheme, they'll use the same font, they'll grab the logo from somewhere, whatever, to make it look realistic enough that you'll click it. It'll then take you to a fake login page. It's probably a credential harvester or possibly something that'll drop malware onto your system. More frequently credential harvester, because once they can get your credentials, they're pretty good unless you have two-factor authentication. Sometimes they can even scam you out of the two-factor authentication. So you have to...
Can you describe two-factor authentication?
Two-factor authentication, basically it's like something that you know, like a password, and then plus something that you have, like maybe like a token, like a YubiKey or something like that. Or, like Google Authenticator is another example of two-factor authentication that like generates like a random code for you, and then you can enter that to authenticate yourself. Google Authenticator is great. YubiKey is an actual physical token that you can use. Those are good too. I would look into getting stuff like that, because the nice thing about a physical token is that it's going to be a lot harder to hack. And also, text messaging is another example of two-factor authentication. Like when your bank says, oh, did you try to log in? Like we're going to send you a message to your phone, and then you can enter it here. That's an example of two-factor authentication. And most of the time it's great. Like 99% of the time, it'll save you from getting hacked. But people are getting creative. There's like a particular phishing kit out there I've heard of that will let you kind of like bypass two-factor authentication. It'll make it so that you can like basically trick them into entering the SMS code or whatever into that login page, so then the attacker can steal it. So, but that's, rare. It's just something to think about, basically.
Say that they can steal your cell phone by having the SIM card?
Yes, SIM swapping is another thing to watch out for. Yeah, and so just make sure that you have like a decent, it's hard because make sure that you have a PIN on your cell phone. Call them and tell them, I want to have a PIN, I want you to verify. You can even say like, I want you to like, there's probably like ways to make sure they can really verify that it's you. Like, I want you to call me at this number every time somebody tries to make a change to my account or something. Because I've heard nightmare stories about people getting SIM swapped, and then once they get SIM swapped, they can like take over your two-factor authentication messages, and they can take over the rest of your accounts, basically. So it's a total nightmare.
So
just make sure you have some kind of
just
protection.
steal a little card.
No,
They call the company.
The SIM in their phone.
Yeah,
becomes
and they get it
your
transferred.
phone.
Yeah, so they don't have to actually physically touch anything. Yeah.
But having teenagers, I mean, you just never know who's doing what.
Yeah.
You'll get a message going,
Yeah.
oh, somebody did this, and you just assume it's one of your kids.
It might not be though.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, it's best to put a pin on it and to make sure that you just verify with your kids whatever they're doing, because people are getting really tricky with that. And once they get your phone, they can take over all those two-factor authentication messages and do so many other things, get into your bank account. It's a total...
Teenagers are getting tricky too, though.
Teenagers are tricky, I know, yeah. I have an 18-year-old. So yeah, this is something to be really aware of. Avoid clicking on any links from suspicious messages. Do not reply to them or try to call the number. If you receive a message from your financial institution, that you weren't expecting, that you didn't initiate, ignore it and call them directly. Like I've heard of cases where, they'll send something that looks like it's from your credit card. Like that was, a fraudulent charge. Please click here to check it out. I've gotten those. I've never done them. They've always been authentic, but I just never click the link because I don't want to take that risk. I just call them at the number on the back of the card. So similar to phishing, watch out for like grammatical errors, typos, offers that seem too good to be true, a sense of urgency. Also check the time that the message was sent. If it's like a weird time that it came through, they could be overseas. A lot of these operations are overseas. Work with your phone provider to block suspicious numbers if you can. So, ransomware. So ransomware is a type of malware that's designed to block access to your computer system until a sum of money is paid. Usually they encrypt all of your files, and then they have the encryption key, and if you pay them, supposedly they'll give you the encryption key. Basically, it's cyber extortion. You can get a ransomware infection lots of ways. One of the primary vectors is phishing attacks. They can get in via phishing attacks. They can get access to your system. They can get persistence on your system. They can figure out where the weaknesses are and then figure out how to get the ransomware infection onto your system and how to spread it across your system. So that's one way that they can get in. Another way is by exploiting something called Remote Desktop Protocol, RDP. That's good to have, if you have employees who are working remotely so they can access their desktop. But it's also very dangerous if not properly protected. VPNs, virtual private networks, are probably a safer way to accomplish that. I would advise kind of trying to watch out for that as much as you can, because that's something they're actively looking for and exploiting. I mean, there are ways that people can do searches on the internet, try to find boxes that are open, that have vulnerabilities, that have this stuff that they can take advantage of, open and get in. And also, any kind of vulnerability, any kind of 0-day, any kind of unpatched software, if it needs to be updated, there are just lots of ways that they can get in. So in the news recently, ransomware knocked 10 hospitals, 3 in Alabama and then 7 in Australia, totally out of commission. The hospitals in Alabama were hit so hard that they had to turn away all but non-critical patients, and it basically shut them down for days. I mean, they had to reschedule surgeries that weren't urgent, and the same with the hospitals in Australia. Supposedly, both ransomware variants were Ryuk, which is a pretty nasty kind of ransomware. There aren't many publicly available encryption keys for that you can get. In some cases, always try to figure out what kind of ransomware you've been attacked with if you do ever get attacked, because some ransomware varieties have encryption keys out there that people, cyber researchers or whatever, have discovered that they can give to you to help you break it. A lot of the time, they're using things that don't have any publicly available keys, so that can be rough. The ransomware can go undetected in a system for days or months after the initial infection, as they kind of bide their time and figure out, how best to spread it across your system and destroy everything. No information has been released yet as to how the infections got in, so I don't know in this case if it was phishing or vulnerabilities or what. And in the case of the Alabama hospitals, they paid the ransom. And I think it was a pretty high one. I think it was probably hundreds of thousands of dollars. The problem with people paying the ransom is that it just encourages them to do it more. And we're just going to see this happen more and more. And we're going to see the ransomware ransoms go up because they're making a ton of money off of this. And it's easy. I mean, they can just keep doing it. So for now, they're back up in business. But anybody who's in the medical industry right now, watch out because they are targeting you. They're picking any kind of high value targets. The FBI just released a bulletin about this. They're targeting, I think, warning healthcare organizations, industrial companies, and the transportation sector. They're trying to do ransomware attacks that are as high impact as possible. They're trying to hit assets that they consider as valuable as possible so they can get you to pay higher ransoms and that they can get you to pay up. But again, this doesn't mean that these industries are the only targets, just something the FBI has been seeing and is warning people about. Anyone can be a target, and no business is too small. I've even seen nonprofits get hit with this stuff. I saw a food bank, I think in Washington State, that got hit with this, and it was $10,000 ransom, I think, that they wanted. And they're a nonprofit, so they were we can't do that. So the community stepped in and helped them rebuild their servers, and they were able to kind of piece things back together from scratch. But I mean, it was rough, and it's not that they're trying to hurt people or trying to specifically target. They're just looking for any vulnerabilities where they can get in and then going for it. So how to defend your business from ransomware? Invest in a good antivirus software. I've heard some people recommend having 2 antivirus softwares. I don't know if that's something you want to look into. It can be tricky to get 2 antiviruses to work together because they kind of conflict with each other, but that's something to consider. Train your employees to make sure they are aware of phishing schemes and the threat that they pose to your network. Do not allow your employees to interface any personal devices with company networks until they are reviewed and approved. That includes plugging their cell phones into your computer to charge, because data can be transferred when they're charging them. So just have your employees plug their personal phones into the wall or something, not into your computer. Because if they have any kind of malware or whatever on their phone, that could potentially be transferred. Ensure that your IT team keeps all software and operating systems updated and that all security vulnerabilities that you can patch are patched. This can usually be automated. And most importantly, have a reliable backup schedule to protect your data. You can do this yourself. You can use cloud services to do it. This can also probably be automated. Just make sure that you have a plan in place, that you have your data backed up somewhere safe that you can access in the event of a ransomware infection. So just have a good recovery plan.
So, question?
Yeah.
So what about things like Dropbox that are not snapshot backup, but they're...
The cloud is always a little risky, but I mean, as long as you have it pretty secured, possibly. I haven't heard of people using Dropbox for backups, really. I'm thinking more like Google Cloud kind of infrastructure, AWS kind of stuff. Dropbox is usually more for like files. I don't know if I'd want to use Dropbox for something like backing up my whole. I guess if it's like your home system or something, and you really wanted to do that, maybe as long as you have it like secured. But any kind of cloud system that you can configure correctly to store your backups in, or you can do it, on site, or you can do it like back them up on tape or back them up on an external hard drive and store them off site, which is probably better because then if something happens on site, then you can be prepared. Like I keep all my personal stuff backed up on an external hard drive. So defend yourself, be cyber smart. I mean, it might seem expensive to implement a cybersecurity program, and for a lot of small businesses, that's hard. But a cyber attack would be a lot more expensive. So key steps that you can take to protect your business: try to have a good cyber awareness program for your staff. This means just talking about things with them. Consider having basic cyber policies in place as guidelines for staff, like guidance on what is an appropriate password, not reusing passwords, appropriate use of computers, devices. Implement multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication whenever possible to secure your accounts. Keep your software as up-to-date as possible. Out-of-date software can be exploited by an attacker and used as an entry point to your network. Ensure that your network is protected with a layered defense in depth strategy. And when I say defense in depth, I mean you want to have multiple things protecting your business, because then if one thing fails, they still have to get through this other thing. If that fails, they still have to get through this other thing. So you want it to be layered like an onion to protect you. At bare minimum, you need like a firewall and a good antivirus. If you can afford more, that's better. There's various security appliances out there you can get. Might be overkill depending on the size of your business, but things like an intrusion detection system, an intrusion prevention system, stuff like that. Some things you can get like a combo appliance that's like everything in one. And you have to have the people in place who can, maintain this stuff for you and monitor it, because if you don't have people watching it, then that data is useless to you. Use an email provider that offers some kind of filtering to reduce spam and phishing. There are probably like settings that you can tweak to try to filter some of the junk mail out. There's lots of different options, so just kind of look into different. But the biggest thing that you can probably the biggest and easiest thing that you can do is educate your employees about cybersecurity. So train them. Ideally, you should be having bare minimum like an annual cybersecurity awareness training for your employees. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just do you probably have like monthly meetings or something with your staff, right? So do like in October maybe, because this is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Yay! So do your monthly meeting on, cybersecurity. Have them all come get pizza or something and just do some slides about, this is what phishing is, this is good password hygiene. These are things that you need to watch out for, be suspicious of. Just educating people, because it's not something that most people have to think about until it happens to them. And it might seem expensive, but if it prevents a cyber attack, it will end up saving you money in the long run. And bonus, passwords. Your security is only as good as your passwords in some ways. Never, ever, ever reuse passwords, because if you reuse passwords, the bad guys have ways to go out and use bots to automate trying to log in across different sites using that email and password combo that they figured out, and they'll just keep at it until they pop one of your accounts. So they can really easily automate it and try to get into your account. So just don't reuse passwords. It makes it too easy. And consider using a password manager. I use LastPass. There's also other things like KeyPass, Dashlane. Password managers are great because they will generate a nice, long, complex password for you. They will save it for you. Some risks associated with that. Sometimes they might have vulnerabilities that they can then go in and patch if you have it on your browser or on your phone. Also, having all of your passwords stored with one master password, but you can set up two-factor authentication on that. You could use, if you want to make it really secure, you could use something like a physical key, like a YubiKey or something. That would make it a lot harder to hack. So I mean, that's what I would recommend though, using a password manager. That's what I do. It's really helpful. Because the ideal password is like long, like 12 or more characters, contains upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. So like nobody's gonna be able to remember all of these different passwords because we all have like 100 or more different online accounts, right? So it's like impossible. Passwords should be random. It should not contain commonly guessed dictionary words. These are easy to crack. There's various like software tools out there that hackers can use to like run through your passwords. They'll get like the hashes of your passwords and then they can run them through and try to crack them like with a rainbow table. There's a dictionary attack where they can like run through and try to crack them looking up common dictionary words. So there's a lot of different ways that they can crack passwords. Don't include your name, your birthday, or references to other personal details that could be guessed. One thing that comes up frequently, you might see on Facebook all these harmless games like, what was the name of your first dog? Or share it here. What was the first street that you lived on? Stuff like that can be a little dangerous because people could possibly use that as clues to try to figure out your password if you're using like your dog's name or whatever as your password. So just be careful what data you expose online because people are watching. So wrong people. Another option, you could use like a passphrase. If you're using a passphrase, it has to be 10 characters or longer. The reason why it has to be 10 characters or longer is because most of the tools they're using to crack passwords will break down at about 10 characters and not work. So if you have like a really complex long passphrase that you'll remember more than 10 characters, chances are it's pretty safe. You could also throw like some special characters in there, some numbers. And always use two-factor authentication on everything that you can. You might hear people saying, two-factor authentication via text messaging is bad because it's not secure. If that's the only kind of two-factor authentication that particular account has, do that because it's better than not having it. The best thing would be something like an authenticator app, like Google has one, Authy is an authenticator, I think Microsoft has one. Authenticator apps are great, generally pretty secure. So.
Why are they more secure?
Because you're not having somebody like text you something. If you're having somebody text you that code, it could potentially be like taken by another third party. It depends on who's watching you and what's happening. Like if they've installed like malware on your system or something like that, and they could.
How does Authy or whatever?
Oh, Authy?
How does it work? If there's no
Well,
date?
so you like usually like scan like a QR code or something to like get it started. Well, you create an account, so you have like username and password, and then from there, when you want to create an account that you want to use the two-factor authentication with, usually they'll have you scan like a QR code, and on the back end it probably exchanges like hashes and keys and stuff like that to say like, oh, this is so and so, and here you go, this is who they are. Yes, we're going to set up this two-factor authentication. I don't know exactly like how all of that works, but it works very well. So I would definitely go with an authenticator app over SMS if possible, but if not, just go ahead and use the text messaging. That's fine. So, and these are just like some. Oh, sorry.
Do you recommend that we save credentials to our personal computer? When you enter your password
Yeah.
and ask you, do you want to save? Of course, in a public one, you'd say never. But what about your own?
I use LastPass for everything, so I have that all locked down, like with two-factor authentication, and I have to enter a passphrase to get into it. There are some risks.
In Google, or where is it saved on Chrome? Or?
It can save if you're using Chrome, then it will save them in Chrome. A lot of people do that. It seems sort of fine because you're authenticating it like with your Google credentials, basically, and if you have those locked down with two-factor authentication, but some stuff does get saved locally as well. So. I like to use the password manager better than doing that, actually. So.
Okay.
So you're suggesting never to tick off that little box that says "Remember me"?
I don't think there's anything wrong with using that per se. It may not be as secure as like using a password manager, but if you're using something like Google, then it's probably authenticating with your credentials on the back end. I don't know exactly the technical like how it works, and that wasn't something that I'd like thought about. But mostly I've been using a password manager over Google because I figure it's probably more secure. So, and it's stored in their cloud. But if you wanted to like tell employees not to do that, you could. But I haven't researched into that as much. So sorry, I could look it up.
But shouldn't you weigh what you're authenticating to if it's personal identifiable information, if it's a private
Yeah.
company database? you should be very cautious about what you use simplistic forms of authenticating to.
Yeah, so it just depends what your level of tolerance for risk is and what you want to get set up.
One of the questions is, if I receive an email from a colleague and I'm kind of suspicious of the language, if you go and check the full email, is it possible, does it happen that full email would be the correct email, or it has to have a difference? You know what I mean? Like,
Are you talking about the email address?
yes.
Okay. Well, if they've like compromised their account, then it could be the correct email address.
Okay, so that's a possibility.
Yeah, it's possible. It's definitely possible to get accounts compromised. Because I mean, people can fall for phishing emails. They can do like credential harvesting. So yeah. Even if it's the right email, if it seems suspicious and it's not something that they would usually be talking to you about, then be wary. But I mean, I've seen cases where in the news where like they'll sit in your inbox and they'll watch everything go back and forth until they figure out enough to like be able to like start a new conversation, as you with that person and say, oh, hey, we're going to meet up on Tuesday, blah, blah, blah. And, oh, by the way, I need you to get me $150 worth of Google Play gift cards or something. So it can be really tricky. But if something seems weird, then definitely be suspicious. But I've also seen them like kind of like pre-texting. They'll kind of make it sound normal at first and then go in for the kill. So it just can be really tricky. If something seems weird, just be suspicious.
And the other thing is, if you receive an email, let's say from Bank of America, and it is a legit, but I usually actually don't respond and I go to the website.
Yes, yeah, that's
Now,
better.
if you go to the website, is it possible that you go to the link, not the link, you go actually search it and go to Bank of America?
Yeah.
And you're directed to a hacker's website that looks exactly like Bank of America?
That would be pretty tricky. I mean, if you're doing like a Google search for Bank of America, I mean, it's possible, but I mean, there's like various ways to do things like that. But chances are, if you're searching for Bank of America comes up, that'll be the legit site. Yeah, I've seen in the news like cases where people were like spoofing Amazon customer service numbers, and they were using like search engine optimization to make the fake numbers pop up before the real numbers. So people were like searching for the Amazon customer service, getting this fake number at the top of the results list, calling in, and then getting scammed out of like gift cards or getting access to their account or something.
My workers' comp site, New Mexico Mutual, they've got a great big disclaimer on their front page. Don't click on anything that says New Mexico Mutual .xyz.
Yeah.
And that is, after a year, it's still on their front page. So.
Yeah, you definitely have to be cautious. Even if I'm like really sure that it's a legit email, I just don't click the link for the most part, because I just figure, why take the risk? I mean, phishing has gotten so good. It's just so easy to craft an email that looks completely realistic. One thing you can do, like before you click on any link, you hover over the link and you check to see, is this really going to bankofamerica.com, or is it going to like www.evilsite.badthing.com or something? Because if you hover over that, then you can usually like see, it'll read it out for you, the URL, so you can tell where you're actually going to. But you do have to be cautious even with that. So I mean, we used to be able to tell people like, look for the little, make sure that it's an HTTPS site, because that'll mean that it's secure. That's not true anymore, because they figured out how to get those certificates and make their phishing sites HTTPS, so that they have the little green lock in the corner, it looks legit, it's not actually legit. So that won't help you anymore. They've gotten really advanced. These are just like some free online resources for small businesses, from various government resources, if you want to go check them out and get some ideas for like ways that you can kind of build up your own cyber program, ways to defend yourself. And that's basically it, and if anybody else has any questions. So.
Will that presentation be available?
Yeah, I can make it available.
This relates to Georgia's ability to take credit cards. If you're in an open Wi-Fi environment and you have a VPN account,
Yeah.
Question 2 is, how do you trust the VPN? But you
Yeah.
have a VPN account and you call up the address of the VPN and log on. Haven't you just transmitted those last 2 things in the open?
Well, once you get the VPN set up, no. So, what about like your credentials to the VPN? Is that what you're asking?
Well, no, you're transmitting the address of the VPN, which VPN it is, and you're transmitting your password to get onto it.
Your password would be encrypted. I mean, I'm sure that if you're like logging into the VPN, that it would have some kind of encryption on your password, so it wouldn't really be, I mean, somebody might be able to capture it maybe for that second, but once you get the VPN up, you should be pretty secure.
What if you're sitting in Starbucks scanning?
Yeah, I mean, that's possible, so. Yeah, it's good to be paranoid, but it's also good to use a VPN, so. Yeah, definitely use a VPN to protect any kind of like sensitive transactions.
How do you know to trust the VPN?
You can do some research on it. You can try to figure out if you think it's trustworthy.
But you don't find out till after the fact when you're indicted.
Exactly, yeah. So I mean, really, there's no good answer for that. Like, I use NordVPN. There's a lot of other VPN companies out there. It's good to research and figure out, like, who owns this VPN company? Like, is it owned by, like, some sketchy company based out of, like, some weird overseas place? Is it, based in America? It's probably better. Is it, pretty legit? Is it a little weird? Another thing to watch out for, like, buying things on Amazon, like buying, like, super cheap, like, battery packs for your phone, super cheap, like, charger cables, stuff like that can be, like, tampered with, and, like, they can put malware on it, which can then infect your phone with various things. They can, like, I think there's even, like, a new kind of USB, the new kind of lightning charging cord that looks just like the Apple charging cord. It's called, like, the OMG cable, and they've basically placed, I think, like, a special, like, memory card into it so it can go and like steal all of your data while it's charging through your computer. So it's weird. OMG cable, yeah. So you can't trust many things. So yeah, definitely be suspicious. That's what I would say. Do your research. I mean, just make sure it's not some weird sketchy VPN.
So you mentioned Gmail as being something that you use. So
Yeah.
do you have some settings on Gmail? I use Gmail too, but I never thought about, can I turn off
Yeah.
clicking on the link, so it doesn't, or other things that you can configure
Yeah.
Gmail that would.
There's a lot of things you can customize in Gmail.
To keep you from doing the.
Yeah, well, Gmail is so good at filtering things out. I don't need to do that much. Like, I basically like never see phishing emails in my Gmail account because they all get sent to spam. And every once in a while I think one time I got an email that was like a legitimate email from my aunt, but it was from like an email address she'd never sent me an email from, and it was something, I forget what she was asking. It's something about like she was visiting and blah, blah, blah. And Gmail flagged it, and they were like, we think this might be a phishing email. And I was like, no, that is legit from my aunt. But thank you for letting me know. Like, that's cool. So Gmail has all kinds of stuff built into it. It was really neat. It was like this big like warning at the top, like, warning, this might be a phishing email. Like, so I was like, oh, cool, that's neat. Another thing to think about with your email account, your personal or your business email account, always go in and just kind of like check the settings and check like the rules. One thing that they do is they'll set up, if they get access to your account, they might go into the rules and like change it so that it's like forwarding everything to their email account, so that even if you like kick them out of your account, they're still going to be getting all of your emails. So like that's one thing that I like to do occasionally, is just go in and check, like, are there any weird forwarding rules set up that I didn't set up in my account? Just kind of to check for, because that's one way that they'll try to get you. But Gmail is highly customizable. There's a lot of training stuff on that online. I think the companies like post a lot of different things for like all the different ways that you can customize it, and there's a lot you can do with it. It's great. So yeah.
Is using, if you're sitting in a public place and using your hotspot in your iPhone, is it more secure than using, more secure than using just a public internet?
Yes, absolutely, yeah, because it's going through, your phone service as opposed to whatever random public Wi-Fi is there. And public Wi-Fi, just be extremely cautious. I mean, you could be in Starbucks and you're looking for Wi-Fi, and there's, Starbucks, and there's like Starbucks super fast Wi-Fi and Starbucks very best Wi-Fi. And so it's possible to, do like an evil twin and kind of set up like a rogue access point, or even just, sitting there on your laptop typing away, be a rogue access point basically for people to log in, and then they can see what you're doing, log all your data, steal your data. So you have to be super cautious anytime you're using public Wi-Fi. And I recommend always using a VPN if you're going to be using public Wi-Fi and doing anything sensitive. So I use NordVPN.
Do you do this on Halloween? Because this scares me to death.
I know, right?
October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so I thought it would be a good time to do. It is scary. I mean, there's a ton of stuff going on, but there are ways that you can defend yourself. Just talk to your employees. Number one thing that can protect you is your people. make them aware. You know, your people can be like a human firewall if you make them that way. You know, you just talk to them, let them know what the risks are, let them know, you know, what might happen if your business got hit by a ransomware. You know, you'd have to shut down. What would happen if you got hit by like a phishing attack and you lost all the money like to pay payroll because you sent it to like the wrong account or something? Like, just, you know, let them know what to look for in a phishing email, because they might not know, and they might just think like, oh, you know, my boss is asking me to get all these gift cards, I better run and do it right now. And you know, so if they're not trained, then that's not their fault. So you have to like talk to them about cybersecurity, and just make sure you have a good IT department in place and a good plan for, you know, patching all of your vulnerabilities, keeping things up to date, and that you have like decent security protecting your network. That's the most that you can do. So.
Are you cautious about using services that you don't have to pay for after reading through the terms and agreements?
Oh, yeah. But nobody reads the terms and agreements. I heard like just like story that I think some like random app on like the iPhone store, like as a joke, they were like, let's put in something about like, we own your soul if you install this app. And nobody noticed until like finally some like cybersecurity was like, hey, this is like not cool. Like, nobody reads those, yeah.
I was trying to tell staff, if Apple is constantly patching, Google is constantly patching, Microsoft is constantly patching, what makes you think any IT person can stop that if the manufacturers are having to constantly remediate their own product?
You have to do what you have to do. I mean, you have to at least keep it up to date once they tell you, you know, like what to patch. I mean, it's right. And then, you know, you have to watch out for like 0 days. Somebody, I mean, there was like a hacker named like Sandbox Escaper who like kept like throwing out these different like 0 days for like Windows and stuff. And usually with a 0 day, if you're like a decent security researcher, you will let the company know about it. You'll say you have like 90 days until I publicly release this, blah, blah, blah. So this person was just like twittering them like, oh, you know, here's a new 0 day, and you get a 0 day, and you get a 0 day. And Microsoft was like, like trying to, so that was, you know, why there was like this flurry of like Microsoft suddenly patching things, because there were like all these things being released. So I mean, yes, it's definitely, you know, a highly dangerous threat landscape right now, but yeah.
So you just mentioned that, you know, buying a non-manufacturer like a USB cable or something. What about wireless charging? Is that as dangerous?
Well, no, because it wouldn't be like connected to your, well, I guess it depends on if you plugged it. I don't think so. I mean, if you have it plugged into the wall, it'd be pretty secure. I don't think that the same data transfer would happen via wireless charger plugged into your computer, but I'm honestly not sure. So I just know that like USB cables plugged directly into your computer can be dangerous. So, any other questions? Yeah.
Let's see, we have all our student and parent information on this application called PowerSchool.
Yeah.
And on
yeah.
Monday,
I've used PowerSchool.
You do?
Yeah.
So on Monday, we're going to pay the company, PowerSchool company, to take all our data and our local hosting and move it to the company site.
Yeah.
And we're thinking that's more secure. Is that true?
Is it in the Ukraine?
Phoenix, Ukraine.
You're transferring the risk, right? So that's, you know, one way that you can deal with risk. You're transferring the risk. You're transferring it to the cloud company. You're saying, we trust you to protect our data. It can be, as long as they don't get like ransomware. I mean, because I've seen news stories about, you know, like various cloud platforms like being like hacked into, and then, you know, getting a ransomware attack, and then their customers not having access to their data. Like there's just like a dentist, some kind of like dentist billing platform that was cloud-based, and they got hacked into, got ransomware attack, and like I think like hundreds of customers across the country could not access their data. That's something you need to worry about. And just make sure that you're reviewing the contract, you know, like what is their uptime, what is their, I'm sure your IT people already looked at all that, so they probably already evaluated it. But, you know, it's hard to say, but you know, it could be more secure as long as nothing terrible happens, basically. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a good move. It's probably easier than trying to secure everything across all of your schools, right? So, but again, you're transferring the risk. You know, it's not gone, it's with them now, so. Does anybody else have any questions? How am I doing it? Oh, good, I did okay on time, yay.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good presentation.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any
Awesome.
other questions? Okay, I'm not gonna tell you the name of my dog. Just saying. So you mentioned we could access this.
Yeah, I can send it to you. It's LAURD, so since I
Okay.
did this like as a Lano volunteer, so yeah.
Okay, so I can forward it on to you if anybody else wants a
just,
Yeah, it's good.
Can you just put it out to the membership,
Yeah, chambers.
this information?
I
Yeah.
can send it to you later, Ren.
are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll send it out, I guess I can send it out like that. It will also be on Monday messages. Jean sends me the link and then I put it on there so you can watch it that way as well.
Okay, yeah,
Is that all right?
yeah.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, everybody, join me in saying thank you to Becky.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It was nice to like get out and talk to people.